Hey everyone, today we're going to be doing another discussion video. In the past, when I've done a discussion video, I've been trying to argue a point, but this one is going to be more of a true discussion about something that's been on my mind a bit lately. A couple of weeks ago, I posted my updated favorite groups list. Making these lists always makes me take a really critical look at what groups I stan and why. And ultimately, it brings me back to a single concept: the way the members of a group influence which groups I and other people stan. Before we jump into the discussion, I want to quickly tell you a bit more about the extra content I'm making over on the Amino app. Last month I told you about how I've been using Amino's Stories feature for a few months now to share short videos split up into multiple scenes, including some Save One Drop One games and sharing some of my recent playlists. Over the weekend, they launched a new feature where you can add quizzes and polls to stories, and this week I'm going to be posting 2 new stories on the app playing around with these new features. You can click the link in the description or pinned YouTube comment or search Amino apps to download Amino, and you can find my stories by searching for I Got 7 in Spirits, just like I am on here. Make sure to follow me and click the bell to get notified when I post these new stories. Alright, so jumping into the discussion, one of the most special aspects of K-pop and one of the major reasons I think people get pulled into the fandom is the amount of access fans have to K-pop idols and how much of their personalities we actually get to see. Sure, mainstream Western celebrities have their social media platforms, they do interviews, they sometimes live stream, and they even sometimes have YouTube channels or make appearances on YouTube channels. And other celebrities are extremely private. Plus, if you want to see a live performance of your favorite artist's songs, you either get to wait for an award show if they're even on one, or get a video from a concert that probably has really terrible audio. Meanwhile, K-pop idols stream live on VLive all the time. Several of the top groups get their own TV shows, and many have their own online shows. When they have a comeback, it's almost as if they're on camera 24/7 with all of their music show performances, interviews, videos, extra live streams, etc., etc. The list goes on and on. K-pop fans are really fortunate to get the amount of content that they do from their favorite groups. Obviously, there is some variance between groups. Some groups do live streams more often, some have more shows than others, some don't get shows at all, but in general, K-pop idols are more accessible and there's more content to watch for even underrated groups. And that's all apart from things like the fan signs that Korean fans can go to and the vast number of fan cams from fan signs and concerts and fan meetings. Even when a group isn't in the middle of their promotions, fans can still get tons and tons of content. And I think this can play into why the K-pop fandom has a reputation for getting so obsessive, because fans get so much access to idols that they get really attached and they feel like they know them. That much access creates a bond and a feeling of familiarity. And I think that although these idols are still traditional celebrities in the sense that they're signed to companies, etc., the bond that they create with fans is much more along the lines of a YouTuber and viewer relationship than that of a traditional celebrity and a fan. So you have traditional celebrities in the sense that they have the resources and fame and money of a company backing their content, but they create bonds with fans in the same way a smaller creator on YouTube would. It creates a tighter bond than fans would usually get with a mainstream Western celebrity. But this discussion about the K-pop fandom and fan culture, I think, is a discussion for a different day because it's a really big discussion and it plays a smaller role in today's discussion. Let me know if you'd like to see that video in the future because I'm thinking of making these discussion videos a monthly thing and that would be a cool thing to discuss. But my point with all of this is that with all of the content that idols give the fans, there comes a sense of closeness. When you've seen hundreds of videos of GOT7's Jinyoung in hundreds of different situations, you feel like you've gotten a good sense of who he is as a person. You've seen multiple sides to his personality, and even though you've never met him, you feel like you know him, and thus a bond has been created. I think this constant stream of content about groups not only causes fans to be more attached to a group, but also causes the members and their personalities to play a larger role in which groups you do and don't stan than they would for pretty much any other genre of music. I mean, as a K-pop fan, could you imagine standing a group and not being able to name all of the members? It seems like an odd suggestion given the culture within the K-pop fandom, and yet it's really normal for fans of Western artists to not know much about the personalities or personal lives of the musicians they listen to. This fandom aspect, while still existing for mainstream Western celebrities, isn't nearly as strong as in K-pop, and especially in pop music, where people are more likely to be casual fans of artists. I mean, there are a lot of mainstream Western celebrities with stage names who are really famous by their stage name, but whose real names aren't super well known. Meanwhile, K-pop fans are out here pretending like stage names don't exist and just going straight to nicknames of K-pop idols' real names. So given how important the members and their personalities are to standing within the K-pop fandom, you now have two very different factors to consider when getting into the group: the music and the members. I think we often take it for granted that we're gonna love a group's members and music equally, but when I really sit down to think about it, that's rarely the case for me, and I think that's probably the same for other people. As an example from my own experience, when I rank my bias groups, Day6 and GOT7 always tie for first place, because despite loving the members and music for both, I ult Day6 for the music more than the members, and GOT7 more for the members than the music. I ult them for different reasons, and therefore find it hard to choose between the two of them. So then, if we're putting importance on both the members and the music, which one is more important? Which one is the one that pushes you from liking a group to standing a group? And this is where it gets into a true discussion, because I think it's something that varies not only from person to person, but also between different groups that each person stands. This dichotomy always makes me think of RuPaul's Drag Race. This might seem like a weird tangential correlation, but stay with me here. It's my favorite TV show I've been watching for like 6 years. If you're unfamiliar, it's a competition where drag queens compete to be the next drag superstar. As with any reality competition, everyone has their favorites, and I always find myself torn between loving queens for their drag and their performances, or because of their personality. Because there are a lot of queens that are unlikable but turn amazing drag looks, and queens whose drag is nothing special but have great personalities. And sure, sometimes I love both aspects for queens, but if I don't, which one's more important? So for me, when it comes to standing, I think I fall on the same opinion for both Drag Race and K-pop groups. Sasha Velour and Bob the Drag Queen aren't necessarily two of my favorite queens because of their drag, but because I like them as people. Similarly, my list of groups that I like but don't stan is littered with groups whose music I love, but whose members I don't know well. I've found that for me personally, to consider a group one of my bias groups, a group I stan, the more important factor is being invested in the members. Saying it aloud, it sounds a bit backward, given that the natural instinct is that the music should be the most important thing in whether or not to stan a music group, but I think that standing a group because of the members is often a much deeper investment, because it's not just an investment in the art, but an emotional investment. It's not dependent on whether or not you like the next song they release, but rather on your feelings for the people involved in creating that art. So, of course, circling back to where this whole discussion started, thinking about this idea made me think more about where each individual group I stan falls within this dichotomy. I already touched on Day6 and GOT7, but to elaborate on it further, I think if I were able to be more objective in this situation, I might put Day6 above GOT7, because although I stan more for the music, my love of the members and music is a bit more even for Day6 than it is for GOT7. However, I love the members of GOT7 so much that I can't not put them in a tie for first place. For their music alone, they might not even be an ult for me, but the members push them to the very top of the list. For Infinite, I think I love the members and music pretty equally. For Pentagon, I think the members slightly outweigh the music. For BAP and 17, it's the opposite. The music slightly outweighs the members. Monsta X is really similar to GOT7 in the fact that the members heavily outweigh the music. I really love Monsta X's members a lot, and although I really like their music, it's a bit more hit or miss for me. And this part of my bias list is where it starts to get interesting, because I almost stan VIX more for their concept than their music, but also more for their music than their members. And I think this is why they fall lower on my bias list, because while their concept is really heavily tied into the music and not really its own separate factor, at least for me, it's an interesting diversion from the rest of the groups. This also remains true for Dreamcatcher, who's next on my bias list, but although I stand more for the music and concept than for the members, their music and concepts are pretty tied. Next on my bias list is BTS, who I stand more because of the members than because of the music. And finally, Triple H, which is pretty even across the board between their concepts, music, and members. So you can see that I'm kinda all over the board with why I stan each of those groups, but when it comes down to it, pretty much every group I don't stan yet, but I'm on the borderline about, is a group that I'd be standing more for the music than the members. And I think that's reflected in the fact that the lower section of my bias list has groups like VIX and Dreamcatcher, who I stan for those same reasons. I think this also reflects in the fact that a lot of the groups near the top of my bias list are ones with a really tight bond, who are like families and who have a really great group dynamic. All that said, given how much emphasis I think that I personally put on the members of a group, there is one slight anomaly within one of my favorite groups. I'm gonna be vague because I don't want people coming for me, but one interesting aspect of this for me personally is that there is one member of one of my bias groups that I don't particularly like, and it's for various reasons. Their personality just doesn't click with mine, and anytime I've interacted with someone who biases them, I've had a pretty negative experience. I don't know why. Obviously, I'm not an anti, I'm not mean toward them online, I don't say hateful things about them. I'm not even telling you who it is because I don't want to be mean toward this person. But it's a very interesting experience standing a group and really loving the group overall, but having one member that I don't really like. For me personally, that's how much impact the members of a group can have, to the point that it's weird for me to stan a group and for there to be one member that I'm not a huge fan of. Let me know if you've had that experience with a group you stan. You can be vague like I was so that people don't come for you. I'm just really curious because I feel like it's not something I see often. So that's about all I had for this video and this discussion. Like I said, for this one I'm not really trying to argue a point, but rather just think it's a really interesting topic for discussion because I think it's a unique aspect to K-pop that I think we sometimes overlook or take for granted. I'm really curious to see where other people fall on this discussion and if this is something you've ever thought really critically about, because I know I have a tendency to overthink things, so let me know down in the comments if you favor one or the other when standing a group, or if you just really don't care about one or the other. You're like, I stan 17 because of their music, but I don't know any of the members' names. Let me know, because I think that's a really interesting and unique perspective. I don't know, I just think this whole discussion is really interesting, and I don't know if I've come across many K-pop fans who stan a group without knowing members' names or caring about the members. I don't know, I just think it's interesting. Okay, I'm gonna stop rambling because at this point I'm very off script and I just keep rambling. So like I said, let me know down in the comments where you fall on this, and as always, thanks for watching.